Smash that subscribe button like it owes you money, hit like if you're ready for the darkest corners of the justice system, and drop a comment if you think you can handle what happens when the law decides someone no longer deserves a name. The sirens cut through the Colorado night like blades. Red and blue light bounced off canyon walls, pine trees, and the black ribbon of highway twisting through the Rockies. The snow had started falling again, thick and fast, swallowing sound, swallowing tracks. By the time the first patrol car skidded to a stop near mile marker 62, whatever had happened here was already trying to disappear. The body lay just off the road, half buried in fresh snow, positioned too neatly to be an accident. A man in his late 40s, well-dressed despite the cold. Italian leather shoes. A tailored coat. No wallet. No phone. No ID. His face was calm, almost peaceful, except for the thin line of dried blood at the corner of his mouth. State Trooper Elena Vasquez crouched beside him, breath fogging the air. She'd seen wrecks, overdoses, suicides. This wasn't any of those. The man's hands were clean. No defensive wounds. No signs of a struggle nearby. Just a body placed like punctuation at the end of a sentence. "What do we have?" she asked. The medical examiner shook his head slowly. "Cause of death looks like asphyxiation. Probably manual. But whoever did it knew what they were doing. No bruising on the neck. No panic marks." Elena's eyes drifted up the road, toward the dark mountains. "So he didn't fight?" "No," the examiner said. "Or he trusted the person who killed him." By sunrise, the story had spread. A mystery man found dead near Florence, Colorado. No fingerprints in the system. No missing persons match. Local news called him John Doe. The FBI called it something else, a problem. Because just 15 miles away loomed ADX Florence, the most secure prison in the United States. The place inmates whispered about in lower security facilities. The place designed not just to hold men, but to erase them. Agent Marcus Hale arrived that afternoon, coat still smelling faintly of jet fuel. He stood at the edge of the crime scene, eyes sharp, jaw tight. He'd been with the Bureau for 20 years, long enough to know when a simple death wasn't simple at all. "This isn't random," Hale said quietly, watching technicians comb the snow. "And it's not local." "How do you know?" Elena asked. Hale didn't look at her. Because whoever this man was, he was invisible on purpose. The autopsy revealed more questions than answers. The victim had undergone cosmetic dental work years earlier. Subtle, expensive. There was an old surgical scar along his ribcage, cleanly done, not from an accident. And embedded deep in the lining of his jacket, stitched so carefully it was almost missed, was a scrap of paper no larger than a postage stamp. On it, a single word was written in block letters. Florence. Not the town. The prison. ADX Florence didn't house just any criminals. It held men the government believed could not be allowed to influence the outside world. Terrorists. Kingpins. Master manipulators. Inmates locked in concrete cells for 23 hours a day, monitored constantly, stripped of contact, stripped of power, stripped, eventually, of identity. Hale knew the rules. No one came near ADX without a record. No one left unnoticed. And yet here was a dead man with a message pointing straight at it. When Hale and Vasquez drove through the prison gates later that evening, the world seemed to narrow. Razor wire glittered under floodlights. Concrete walls rose like cliffs. The silence was heavy, oppressive, broken only by the echo of their footsteps. Warden Thomas Kessler met them inside. Tall, composed, his face carved into an expression that had learned not to react. "You're asking if one of my inmates is connected to your John Doe," he said flatly. "Yes," Hale replied. "And if anyone here had contact with the outside world recently." Kessler didn't hesitate. "That's impossible." "Impossible doesn't mean it didn't happen," Hale said. The warden's eyes hardened. ADX Florence is designed to eliminate opportunity. No calls without monitoring. No visits without glass. No movement without escorts. If you're implying a breach. "I'm implying," Hale cut in, "that someone wanted us to look here." They started with the obvious. Inmate files. Transfer records. Deaths in custody. One name kept resurfacing, buried under layers of redacted text. Evan Calder. Once a financial prodigy with ties to organized crime across 3 continents. Convicted of orchestrating a web of fraud, blackmail, and contract killings without ever pulling a trigger himself. The press had called him the accountant of violence. He'd vanished into ADX Florence 8 years earlier after multiple attempts to manipulate guards and inmates in other facilities. Officially, Calder was still alive. Still housed in cell D17. Still locked down. But when Hale requested a live visual confirmation, the room went quiet. "We conducted a wellness check yesterday," Kessler said. "Routine." "And?" Hale pressed. Kessler hesitated. "Just long enough." And Calder refused to respond, he said. "That's not unusual." "Did you see him?" Hale asked. Kessler's silence answered that question. Security footage from the cell block showed guards delivering food, sliding trays through slots, collecting untouched meals. No movement. No sound. Calder's cell camera had gone dark for exactly 7 minutes 2 nights earlier, logged as a technical reset. 7 minutes was an eternity in a place like ADX. "Show me the maintenance logs," Hale said. As they dug deeper, the story grew stranger. A civilian contractor had been on site that night. Name: Daniel Mercer. Clearance level: limited. Purpose: camera diagnostics. Mercer had signed out at 2:14 a.m. and then vanished. No vehicle record. No credit card activity. No phone pings. Like the man in the snow, Mercer didn't exist anymore. Elena leaned over the table, voice low. What if Calder didn't just disappear? What if someone helped him? Hale shook his head. "No one escapes ADX Florence." "Then how do you explain this?" she asked, pushing a photo across the table. It was a still frame from a traffic camera 50 miles north. Grainy. Nighttime. But clear enough to see a man in the passenger seat of a dark SUV, face turned toward the window. Even through the blur, Hale recognized him from old court photos. Evan Calder. Alive. Outside. Smiling. The bureau locked the case down immediately. Phone seized. Reports classified. Officially, John Doe was now part of a federal investigation tied to national security. Unofficially, panic rippled through agencies that had built their reputations on control. Because if Calder was free, then ADX Florence had failed. And if ADX Florence could fail, then every monster buried inside it suddenly mattered again. Late that night, Hale returned to the morgue alone. He stood over the unidentified body, studying the face one more time. Something had been bothering him since the beginning. The calm. The placement. The message. He noticed it then, just beneath the man's left ear. A faint, almost invisible tattoo, revealed only under a certain angle of light. 3 small letters. EC. Hale felt the weight of it settle in his chest. This wasn't just a victim. This was a warning. And when the coroner finally identified the man through an international DNA database ping hours later, the truth landed like a gunshot in a closed room. The body by the roadside wasn't a stranger at all. It was Evan Calder's former attorney. The man who knew every secret. The man who was never supposed to leave Florence alive. And somewhere behind concrete walls designed to erase identities forever, a cell door stood closed, but no one could say for certain who, if anyone, was still inside. By morning, the Bureau had buried the roadside murder under layers of classification. No press briefings. No leaked statements. Officially, the dead man near Florence had never existed. Unofficially, every senior agent involved understood the same thing. Evan Calder hadn't escaped ADX Florence by accident. Someone had opened a door that was never supposed to open. Agent Marcus Hale stood inside the prison's control room, surrounded by screens showing concrete corridors, steel doors, and silent cells. Each camera angle felt like a reminder of the lie everyone had believed for years, that ADX Florence was perfect. "Start with the night Mercer disappeared," Hale said. An analyst rewound the footage. Timestamps rolled backward until they reached 1:58 a.m. The camera outside cell D17 flickered, then stabilized. Calder's cell door never opened. No alarms. No forced entry. Zoom in, Hale ordered. The image sharpened. For a fraction of a second before the blackout, something moved at the base of the door. Not a body. Not a hand. A shadow. Thin. Deliberate. Play it frame by frame. There it was. A gloved hand slipped through the food slot, holding a small device no bigger than a deck of cards. The camera died immediately after. Elena Vasquez felt her stomach drop. That's insider access. No, Hale said quietly. That's insider planning. The device was identified within hours. A modified signal disruptor, military grade, never sold on the open market. The kind of tech that required favors, connections, and silence. They tracked Daniel Mercer's background next. On paper, he was clean. Former Air Force electronics technician. No criminal record. No known debts. But when they pulled financials from shell accounts flagged overseas, the picture changed. Mercer had received a series of payments over the last 18 months. Carefully spaced. Routed through trusts in Switzerland and Singapore. Each payment just small enough to avoid suspicion. Just large enough to matter. Sender. Unknown. But Hale knew better. Calder built this, he said. From inside. They reconstructed the timeline. Over years, Calder had manipulated people he never physically touched. Guards who wanted promotions. Contractors who wanted money. Administrators who wanted quiet careers without headlines. He offered nothing that looked like a crime. Just favors. Advice. Introductions. Power didn't need proximity. It needed patience. Inside ADX Florence, Calder had learned the rhythms of the prison. Shift changes. Maintenance windows. Blind spots created by human routine, not architectural flaw. The prison erased identities, but it couldn't erase ego. And Calder fed on that. The next discovery hit even harder. When they finally forced open cell D17, weapons drawn, the room was empty. No blood. No signs of struggle. The bed was neatly made. The toilet flushed clean. On the wall, carved so lightly it blended with the concrete, was a message etched using nothing more than time and friction. You never owned me. The implication was devastating. Calder hadn't fled in panic. He had left on his terms. The warden's authority collapsed instantly. Internal affairs sealed off the facility. Guards were suspended. Contractors interrogated. Every system audit uncovered another small compromise. Nothing dramatic, nothing obvious, but together they formed a map. A map of escape. Then the deaths started accelerating. 2 days after the discovery of the attorney's body, a retired federal judge was found dead in his Florida home. Apparent suicide. Except for the missing files from a locked cabinet and the same faint initials carved beneath the skin of his wrist. EC. The judge had presided over Calder's sentencing. Next was a former prosecutor in Oregon. Fatal car accident. Brake lines cleanly cut. Surveillance footage from a nearby gas station showed a man in a baseball cap watching from across the street, never entering the frame fully. The pattern was undeniable. Calder wasn't running. He was cleaning up. Each victim had played a role in burying him alive inside ADX Florence. Each had information that could expose how Calder's financial empire truly worked. How many politicians, corporations, and law enforcement officials had unknowingly benefited from it. Hale felt the pressure closing in. This wasn't just a manhunt anymore. This was institutional failure on a scale no one wanted to admit. You're telling me, Elena said late one night, surrounded by case files, that the most isolated inmate in America planned his revenge while staring at 4 concrete walls. Yes, Hale replied. And we helped him. The most chilling moment came when Hale received an unmarked envelope at his hotel. No return address. No postage. Just his name written carefully on the front. Inside was a single sheet of paper. A transcript. It was from a sealed hearing held 9 years earlier, one Hale himself had testified in. A meeting where evidence had been withheld to secure Calder's permanent placement in ADX Florence. evidence suggesting Calder hadn't ordered one of the killings attributed to him. At the bottom of the page, a handwritten note. Justice is only clean when it's convenient. Hale felt the room tilt. This wasn't just about revenge. Calder was rewriting the narrative, turning the system's secrecy against itself. Security around Hale and Elena doubled. Safe locations rotated. Communications encrypted. Still, the sense of being watched never faded. Calder didn't need proximity to threaten them. He only needed to prove that distance meant nothing. That proof came at ADX Florence itself. During a routine inspection of the East Wing, a guard collapsed. Dead before hitting the floor. No struggle. No sound. The autopsy later revealed a slow-acting toxin absorbed through the skin. Taped beneath his ID badge was a folded note. Everyone here thinks the walls protect them. The message was clear. Calder still had reach inside the prison. Or worse, he wanted them to believe he did. Panic spread quietly through the staff. Requests for transfers spiked. Guards began refusing overtime. The prison that was designed to project absolute control now vibrated with fear. Late that night, Hale and Elena reviewed Calder's financial web again, searching for something they'd missed. That's when Elena noticed an anomaly. A charitable foundation in Europe, dormant for years, suddenly active. The name froze them both. Florence Initiative. It's a dead drop, Elena said. A signal. They traced the foundation's board members. Every name was fake. But the registered address led to a private medical facility in northern Italy, one known for discreet neurological procedures and identity reconstruction, plastic surgery, dental alteration, memory suppression therapy. Calder wasn't just erasing witnesses. He was erasing himself. Hale leaned back, realization settling in like a sentence. ADX Florence didn't erase his identity, he said. It taught him how. As dawn broke over the mountains, another update came in. Surveillance had caught movement near a remote airstrip outside Denver. A private jet had departed without filing a flight plan. The pilot's identity was false. And on the cracked asphalt near the hangar, drawn in chalk, were 3 small letters. EC. Hale knew then that Calder wasn't heading away from Florence. He was circling back. And whatever endgame he was building, it required the prison that tried, and failed, to make him disappear. Somewhere behind reinforced walls and sealed records, a truth waited to surface. And when it did, no one inside the system would be clean enough to survive it. The jet never showed up on any radar that mattered. By the time air traffic control realized something was wrong, it was already descending toward a private strip carved into the high desert, less than 10 miles from ADX Florence. The irony wasn't lost on anyone tracking the signal bleed from unauthorized transponders. Evan Calder wasn't fleeing the prison. He was returning to it. Agent Marcus Hale arrived as the sun sank behind the mountains, casting long shadows across the concrete towers of ADX Florence. The place looked unchanged, cold, silent, absolute. But Hale knew better now. He'd seen the fractures hiding beneath the myth. You still think he wants in? Elena Vasquez asked, her hand resting near her sidearm. No, Hale replied. I think he never left. The proof came minutes later, buried in a sealed report that should have been reviewed years earlier. A classified medical addendum tied to Calder's incarceration. The kind of document that never reached open court, never reached public record. During Calder's first year at ADX, he'd suffered a neurological episode. Officially, it was logged as stress-induced catatonia. Unofficially, he'd been transferred for 48 hours to a black site medical wing beneath the prison. What happened there had been erased. Except for one name at the bottom of the report. Dr. Samuel Rook. Rook wasn't a bureau employee. He was a contractor specializing in cognitive compliance, behavioral fracture, and psychological reconstruction. His work sat in the gray zone between therapy and weaponization. And 3 months ago, he'd vanished. They found him an hour later. Not dead. Waiting. Rook sat alone in an interview room deep inside the prison, hands folded, expression calm. He hadn't resisted. Hadn't tried to run. It was as if he'd been expecting them. "You're too late," he said softly when Hale entered. "Late for what?" Hale asked. "For the version of this story where you're in control." Rook told them everything. Years earlier, Calder had agreed to something unprecedented. In exchange for cooperation on classified financial intelligence, the government authorized an experimental program. Calder's physical confinement would remain absolute, but his identity, his legal, financial, and psychological footprint would be dismantled and redistributed. Calder didn't escape ADX Florence. He multiplied. Fragments of his network were embedded into shell corporations, offshore trusts, and proxy operators. His face disappeared, but his influence didn't. The man in cell D17 became irrelevant. The system focused on erasing the body while ignoring the architecture of power he'd already built. And when he realized the program was ending, Elena asked. Rook's eyes flickered. He activated the contingency. The contingency wasn't an escape plan. It was a correction. Calder had anticipated betrayal. He knew the same system willing to erase him would eventually deny him. So he created redundancy, people who thought they were acting independently, unaware they were following a script written years earlier. The attorney, the judge, the prosecutor. They weren't targets of rage. They were loose ends. He wanted the record clean, Hale said. Not vengeance. Control. Rook nodded. And an audience. The prison alarms began screaming. Not from outside breaches, but from within the administrative wing. Doors sealed. Corridors locked down. The prison's own systems turned inward, trapping staff in place. On every monitor in the control room, a single message appeared. "You taught me isolation. I perfected it." Calder's voice followed. Calm. Measured. Unmistakable. "I was sentenced to disappear. So I did. But understand this, ADX Florence was never my cage. It was my classroom." The final revelation hit like a collapse. Calder's physical body had never left cell D17. The man seen on traffic cameras, the jet, the signatures, they belonged to a successor. A man who had undergone surgery, training, and psychological imprinting to become Calder's visible echo. A proxy. The real Evan Calder was still inside ADX Florence. And he was dying. Terminal diagnosis. Months at most. The medical files confirmed it. The neurological episode years earlier hadn't been stress. It had been the beginning of the end. Calder hadn't escaped to live free. He'd stayed to finish the story. As the lockdown lifted, Hale was escorted to cell D17 for the final time. The door slid open with a mechanical sigh. Calder lay on the narrow bed, thinner now, weaker, but smiling. "You look disappointed," Calder said. "You expected a ghost." "I expected a monster," Hale replied. Calder chuckled softly. "Monsters want chaos. I wanted symmetry." "You killed people." "I removed variables," Calder said. "So did you, Agent Hale. You just used different paperwork." Silence stretched between them. "They'll remember your crimes," Hale said. "No," Calder replied. "They'll remember the failure." Calder's eyes drifted to the camera above the door. "You built a prison to erase men like me. But you never asked what happens when the erased man learns how erasure works." Hours later, Evan Calder was pronounced dead. Natural causes. The official statement declared the case closed. The public never learned how close the system had come to collapse. ADX Florence resumed operations. New inmates arrived. New identities began to fade. But 3 months later, in a small town outside Vienna, a body was found in a hotel room. No ID. No fingerprints. No records. Just a faint carving beneath the ear. EC. And for the first time, the letters didn't stand for a name. They stood for a method. Because ADX Florence hadn't erased Evan Calder. It had taught him how to disappear, and how to make others disappear too. If you think this story was intense, you're not ready for the next one. Hit subscribe, stay alert, and remember, some prisons don't just lock people away. They teach them how to come back.